be self-employed or own a business in the Philippines. In fact, when you take a look at the deep down of the other types of business owners in the Philippines, if you see here, family business without pay, a lot of female business owners work for their family business without pay. Bakit ganon? Right? So what we're really trying to do is encourage all the female entrepreneurs to make that half as likely to go equally as likely after these talks. Next slide, please. So these challenges that we face as female entrepreneurs have always been the same. Over the decades, and also quite similarly, and male operators find financial, time, and support lacking as a startup founder. So we'll take a look at each of them in the next few slides. We go to the next slide, please. We'll tackle the financials. Next slide, please. Highlight lang siya ng pages. All right. On a financial basis, actually, if you take a look at all of the funding that has happened so far in the Philippines, we know that around 60% of the funding that was raised, over $10,000, have been raised by females. But only 20% of them has raised over $100,000. And really, it's the fact of maybe sometimes it's about confidence, it's about distinction. And I think one of the things that we usually don't look at is the funding on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes you just have to pay your workers on the next payroll. And these are some of the solutions powered by tech that we can help out with. Again, another disclaimer, it's a little bit of a hard sell in the next couple of slides. So if we take a look at GCash, you guys are aware of G-Loans, G-Credit, G-Gives. These are the certain micro loans that you guys have access to. And it's not just being given by GCash. The prevalence of e-wallets and digital banks has really allowed business owners to gain access to microloans. And this is something where you don't have to fill up 20 to 25 pages of requirements and KYC to do. This is something that's easily accessible for startups, but have maybe not been raised to the surface. And of course, there are also micro solutions that you guys can subscribe to that will help ease the day-to-day financial pains of the services. Next slide, please. Next up is time. We go to the next slide, please. See, I had a lot of stats, but I think it got cut out, so I'm just gonna take it from my head. So if we take a look at automation, actually, female founders, they're not just founders. Females have a lot of slash, dash, apostrophes. We are moms, we are breadwinners. Maybe the business is also a side hustle. So if we take a look at the stats, females are actually more likely, well, less likely to spend time in their business compared to men. And one of the things that tech can do is help with the automations. So these are the repetitive tasks that you may more likely either hire an additional headcount or do beyond your operational hours just so that you can make ends meet. We experienced this a lot in Rush when we started the business. We were doing invoices during ledgers. I was talking to the panel here how a lot of people had ledgers. We are guilty of that. A lot of our sales pipelines were also done via email instead of a SaaS platform. So actually, here are the partners that we have in Rush, and they've tremendously really helped us make our operations more seamless. From AWS and Google to all the way down to Grab for logistics, as well as payments from PayMongo and Sendit. And these are the things I highly encourage early startups to do. I know it's very easy and actually simple to just hire another headcount, since of course sometimes services can be cheaper than a SaaS subscription, but it's not scalable. So the earlier you can invest in automations, the better the better chances we will quickly more scale the business. Next slide, please. And of course, lastly, support. Just as mentioned in the opening lines earlier, next slide, please. Next, ayan. Awareness in female entrepreneurship is really what is lacking. There are a lot of female entrepreneurs out there. According to DTI, there are actually more females-led startups than there are men in the Philippines. But the male-led startups are the ones that are more successful. And why is that? Maybe because we lack the expertise, we lack the confidence. It's actually the latter. So when we did our research, men are actually more likely to start their businesses before 35. And us women, we like to prepare. We like to make ourselves experts before we start off. So there really is that big gap that we need to fill. We need to be able to support each other and to be able to educate ourselves that, yes, our planning is enough. Time is to do action. So these are the type of resources that can help you guys with. In Globe, we have a business academy. So on a monthly basis, we do webinars and thought leaderships that help businesses how to manage their financials, how to do the best practices for promotions, etc. I told you guys medyo hard sell eh. Pero of course, there's also the community. So I'm very happy that there is a growing community base for female entrepreneurs. Next slide, please. So of the three things I mentioned, there's financial, time, and support challenge. I hope that this conversation will help us transform it to financial innovation, automation expertise, and network care. Next slide, please. Because the next time that we do a speech here, and they say, what's the difference between female entrepreneurs versus male entrepreneurs? I think the next slide, the answer should be nothing. Entrepreneurs, period. There's no difference. So thank you so much, everyone. Sorry. Kalimutan ka, meron mo palang hard sell, sorry. So if you guys are curious about the software as a service and automation, please scan this QR code and get a chance to get your free month subscription to us. Next slide. Sorry. Another hard sell. Because we're part of the Globe community, if you guys want to join the Globe My Business Academy, you can scan this and also take a look at all of the service portfolios that are made more affordable for the startups. Okay. Yun na, last time. Thank you. For a photo op. Miss Stephanie Kubota again and Miss Katrina Chan for a photo op. Pinay Tech She-roes to hear from as she shares her startup journey with us today. Please help me introduce our next guest and welcome Ms. Bella Gupta, the founder and CEO of Eda Mama.
Great. Thank you, Startup Pinay. Thank you, Philippine Startup Week, for having me here today. My name is Bella. There's a lot of noise. My name is Bella. I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey in building Edamama and describing what success looks like and what our advice might be for founders today in the room today, right? So Before I get started, just wanted to check how many entrepreneurs are in the room. Way up high, so I can see you. Okay, a pretty good number. Okay, how many aspiring entrepreneurs? Okay, a few. Okay, cool. Yeah, so good to see a mix of existing and aspirational entrepreneurs in the room. I totally agree with what Steph said. You know, hope next year we don't have to carve out a separate room for women entrepreneurs. We're just all equal as entrepreneurs, and we can shed labels together. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey into starting Edamama, and I hope that it helps some of you who are thinking about going down a similar path. Think about your own journey a little bit more deeply, right? So going to the next slide. I moved to the Philippines more than 10 years ago. I am an alum of Globe. I actually spent almost 5 years at Globe building a startup there called AdSpark. When I left, I decided I wanted to pursue something entrepreneurial. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. So I did what they teach you in business school. I made an Excel file of all the different possibilities. But the framework that I used is something that I learned as a child. I grew up in Japan, and I'm a big fan of the Ikigai framework. Does anyone know what that is? Yep. So it really just asks you, and this is something I highly encourage if anyone is thinking about professional decisions, where you want to be spending your time, what kind of startups you might want to pursue, is really finding what is that culmination for you between what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at, right? And as I did this exercise, the epicenter for me was really the edamame bean, right? Which I actually drew in my living room one day. And I realized that I really wanted to be in the parenting space because I am a mom. I have 2 kids, Elena, who's 9, and Evan, who's 5. Today they are my CMOs, my chief merchandising officers. And they really help me. They're very involved in the business, but they're largely my inspiration, right? And the reason I wanted to share this journey is because I think it's very true that and I think the studies really show this as well, that a lot of women who pursue startups do it out of a personal pain point, passion, interest that they're solving for, right? So for me, it was a mix of pain point and opportunity. I'll talk a little bit about what that is. But it really came knocking at my doorstep in the form of a box of nuts and bolts. So I was actually, if we can go to the next slide, I was actually looking to buy a tricycle for my son. And I went online here to one of the platforms. I ordered something. And this is actually the next photo. The next slide will show you what actually showed up, right? It was just a box of nuts and bolts. And I felt very underserved as a customer. Here I was. I wanted something safe, reliable, something I paid good money for, but it was upon me to assemble this. And the manual had been thrown out because it turns out the product was shipped from overseas, right? And it was not in English. So, of course, none of that worked out. We ended up wanting to return the product, but couldn't contact the seller, right? They wouldn't take it back. And that's sort of the light bulb moment that sparked a lot of the inspiration behind Edamama. And so what were really the pain points, right? If we go to the next slide. Very fragmented experience. For those of us who are parents in the room, you can probably relate to this. To whether it's a product or a service, content, community experiences for parents is very fragmented today. A lot of quality and trust concerns, as shown in the example earlier. Shopping online today still feels like a very search-led experience. We believe parenting is a discovery-led journey. And customer service, right? A lot of room for improvement there. So that's sort of how we got started, really seeing if we could solve for these problems. And of course, we are a pandemic baby. So going to the next slide, we launched just as the pandemic started in the Philippines. And as we've seen, right, COVID has certainly accelerated a lot of sectors in this market. E-commerce is definitely one of them. We have the 2nd largest population in the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, sorry, right? Philippines has over 100 million people, but we have the smallest size e-commerce market, right, in the region. So COVID certainly has accelerated that, and about 60% of the internet economy by 2025 will be powered by e-commerce, right? So we're now one of the fastest growing e-commerce industries in the world. And very excited to see not just brands like Edamama find a niche for themselves in the market, but we're going to be one of many others that start. So going to the next slide, really taking the insights from where we got started and why we truly believe that mothers are not only really valuable consumers, they're incredibly powerful influencers. So it's really, the reason I shared this story is because firstly, I wanted to talk about how I got started and why, right? It came from a very personal place. And I think there's something really powerful about that if you're thinking about your own journey as an entrepreneur, right? Focus on what you are interested in, what you are passionate about, where you think you can add value, and success will follow if you focus on that. But also, I think there's a big mission to our work, and for me, it's really about helping mothers make better decisions, better choices, right? Because happy mothers will raise happy children, and children are the future of this country. And so there's a broader mission here as well. And we find that, we have forums like this to talk about how to inspire more women to start companies. But also from a consumer standpoint, there's so many opportunities to solve for women in this country, right? I have a lot of friends today doing great work in healthcare, services for women as well, financial services and inclusion. There's lots that can be done. So it's a very, very exciting time to be a founder, and definitely it's an asset to be a founder who is female and working on problems that we understand better than anyone else, right? So for us, it's really about going on a lifetime journey. Next slide, please. Next slide. Going on a lifetime journey with moms. We see mothers today as not just spending on their children, but they are the chief decision makers of their household, right? They are making decisions for their kids, for themselves, and for their family more broadly. So we'd love to go on a journey where we can be part of their decision making for not just when they're pregnant, but as their children grow up. And we've done this by really focusing on differentiation. And that's the second point I'd love to bring. I think a lot of questions around building vertical plays or niche plays will be, how do you differentiate yourself in market, right? And I think that's very important even for your own business. Always find moats that you can build around your platform that differentiate you from incumbents or from your competition, right? What did that mean for us? It meant, moving to the next slide, firstly, really focusing on personalization. We have a very strong personalization element to our platform. Number two, next slide, is to focus on content-driven commerce. We actually don't spend a lot on ads. I'll tell you a bit more about that later in my presentation, but that's one of my big pieces of advice to anybody. Don't spend too much on advertising. Number three is to really innovate around your customer. Listen to them, their pain points, their problems, and build features that make their lives better, right? That solve a problem, that respond to a preference or a need of your customers. And that's really, really important. Number four is really to build adjacencies. We all know that we live in very uncertain times. You have to constantly pivot and find new ways to reach new audiences or to offer additional services to your customers. For us, actually, that meant going from selling products to even selling services, right? So we actually have classes, events, activities that we're looking at now that you can book. We're looking at telehealth services. We're looking at education solutions more broadly for families. So always, those are the four things that I would say have helped us differentiate from the incumbents in the market, but I think is hopefully a helpful framework for you to think also about how to really drive differentiation with what you do, right? Okay, so we turned 2 years old in May. We're a toddler. A lot we've learned along the way. And just wanted to share a little bit of what our definition of success would look like, right? So yeah, I think firstly, you can't drive a car that doesn't have any fuel in it. So happy to share, we've raised one of the largest Series A rounds in the country. Thank you. Yeah, the reason I'm sharing this slide is because I want all women here to know that you can do it, firstly, right? Secondly, if you look at our cap table, we have a very healthy mix of what we call financial and strategic investors. Financial investors are VCs, right? These are venture capital entities that will invest in your business, expect a certain return. But we also have strategic investors. And strategic investors are those that have an inherent synergy with your business. They want to see you succeed because there are economies of scale or other synergies that can be achieved. So keep that in mind, right, as you're building your own cap table. Next slide. You will be nowhere without your team. Build a great team. Find people that you would actually want to work with. As they say, A players hire A players. They don't hire B players, right? So don't find people who are, you know, let me flip that around. Find people who are better, smarter, stronger, more hardworking than you are, because you'll definitely be better off. And I can definitely say that about my team up here. Next slide. So we are 4 mamas by mamas, right? If you would have seen in the previous slide, 80% of my leadership team is moms or women. We don't discriminate. If you're a man, you're welcome at Edamama as well, right? But you've got to love your mother. That definitely helps. So we've built a business today that is not only catering to a female market, but also comprised, reflecting that internally, right? With our management team and the style we bring to our leadership, which is very much bringing our authentic selves to work every single day. So what is our measurement of success in the business? I think it's very important to define what success looks like for your business. For us, it's really 4 things. We want to build the largest homegrown e-commerce platform in the country. Number 2, we want to build omni-channel. We want to be where our customers are, right? There's a tendency to glamorize digital as a channel, but at the end of the day, a big portion of Filipinos are offline. They are going to malls, they are going to restaurants, they are going to physical spaces to socialize. So be where your customers are. Don't think uni-channel, always think omni-channel, right? And COVID taught us all a very important lesson about that. Thirdly, we want to build proudly made in the Philippine brands in the parenting space. We launched our private label brand Bean, which is in collaboration with local artists. Do check out bean.ph and support local. These are all Filipino-inspired fashion brands for kids. And we are soon rolling out other categories, right? All proudly made in the Philippines. And fourth, a very important measure of success for us is going to be, can we reimagine the workspace, right? And this is particularly important for us because we have a lot of parents in our company. We have a lot of mothers who would have otherwise maybe left the workforce. And not only do they work at Edamama, they are in leadership positions. And for us, it's about creating a work environment where you really can bring your authentic self to work. You have flexibility at the workplace, and you're able to lead by example, right, with your people. And I say this all the time. I actually think mothers make excellent leaders because we are just bound to embrace multitasking and a whole bunch of other really wonderful leadership traits. So yeah, our humble advice. So moving on very quickly here. I don't want to give advice that is about work-life balance or, you know, getting over imposter syndrome. I feel like, as the stats were shared earlier, if there was ever a country in the world where you can succeed as an entrepreneur that's a woman, it's this country, right? So now it's up to you. Are you going to take that leap? Are you going to get the work done, right? So my advice is going to be, assuming you've already made that decision for yourself and you're not going to let anyone get in the way of your dreams. So first advice is to focus on something. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, okay. So focusing on something specific. You know, when I was going through the process of fundraising, I would always have a lot of investors, prospective investors say, tell me about your TAM, tell me about market size. tell me this, tell me that. How are you going to get to, I want to see 50, $100 billion market opportunity, right? I actually think very different. For me, it's about focusing on something very specific, and from the beginning, getting really good at it, and then sort of, building the highest possible probability of getting to network effects, as we say, as quickly as possible, right? So I actually think very differently. For me, going into the parenting space was something that felt very niche, for sure. But if you get that right, think of the role that mothers have in decision making in their households, right? So there's a very exciting flywheel effect that they can drive in a family, in a household, in a country. So I would say, don't be afraid to pursue something that feels very specific, and feels something that you think is truly aligned with your interests and your passion, right? You don't have to chase building the next Uber, right? Or there are a lot of other exciting problems to solve for, particularly in a market like the Philippines. And there's a wonderful framework actually that I used when I was building Edamama, right? Which is focus very deeply initially, right? Build a great product. Focus. Your goal when you launch is minimum viable happiness, right? For your customers. They have to like you. They have to like what you offer, because they will automatically take you to that tipping point in your business that allows you to achieve market leadership and domination. So next slide is to focus on this idea that you need to be omnipresent as a brand, right? For a lot of traditional businesses, COVID was a very challenging time. And it took a lot for businesses to digitize. They just weren't ready, right? There might be another such event in the future. So if you are building a consumer-driven, focused brand, please make sure you're always thinking omni-channel, right? Let's go to the next slide. What are examples of omni-channel? Of course, your own site. There's social media. There's other marketplaces that you can tie in with, and then your own offline store, right? We just opened our first pop-up store in Glorieta. Our first inline store goes live in December, and we're really building an omni-channel brand, right, in the market. Okay, this is my favorite topic, choosing organic growth. I think there's a tendency to think that building a business, building a brand is all about spending on marketing and they will come, right? Our data 2 years into this business actually shows us the reverse. The customers that we acquire organically are more loyal to our platform than the customers that we paid to acquire, right? So for that, you're gonna have to put in a little bit more work to drive that LTV, right, with your customers. And this is a very important point. I think for a lot of us, we run straight to running ads on social media and on other platforms. But this can be a slippery slope because it can get very expensive very quickly, and you can't compete with the budgets of big companies when you're a startup, right? So how can you build organic growth in your business? Some things that you can think about, this is what we have done as well, is really invest in content creation, SEO. It's very, very powerful. Invest in micro-influencers. I would say micro-influencers are more powerful to our business than our celebrities, right, at this time. Customer experience, focus on creating delight for your customers. This is such an overrated idea. It feels sometimes, but it is so important that you just have to deliver a great customer experience. And if you get it wrong, make sure you make it right with your customers. And then really exciting evolutions that allow chat to make a lot of your business more automated, right? So find ways to bring that automation into your business that creates that organic growth that you need for yourself. That's it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Bella. Please stay on stage for a photo op again with Ms. Katrina Chan.
Hi. Hi, everybody. So I'm Cass. I will be moderating this discussion with these wonderful people here this afternoon. So we're looking forward to your attention. And you know, after this, I think, Kat, there's like a Q&A, right? Like after this is over, they can come to us and like, you know, get to know them even better. So for today's discussion, I was told to make sure that we humanize the experience of these wonderful founders. Of course, we see one very handsome rose among the thorns here today. But we're so glad to have you here, Dennis, Kat, Jules, Wirin, and Gina. So thank you so much for being here. So, you know, without further ado, the title of this, this talk is She Can Have It All. It's an intergenerational discussion on career progression and work-life balance. So one of the things that I'm sure a lot of people here today would want to know about is, you know, for the startup founders, right? So the startup founders in this panel, can you tell us a little more about what triggered your decision to start a business, right? At the end of the day, it's still easier to just not think about things from scratch, right? So I want to understand, maybe Dennis, you can go first. What prompted you to become a startup founder?
Yeah, so when I came to the Philippines for the very first time, two things struck me. Number one, the culture, and that just really connected me to it. So I just fell in love with that, having grown up in the US. And the second thing was a little bit more on the disheartening side. I just saw such a huge socioeconomic gap in so many ways, and was hoping that one day I can come back and help our country.
Great, thank you so much for that, Dennis. Jules, how about you?
So in 2015, I quit my job in a PR agency, and that's when I really had this, I call it the gap year, and that's really where I reflected where I want to take my career, and a lot of it is really taking control of what you want to do, being passionate about solving problem also was really one of the triggers. In 2020, I moved to LA, empty apartment. I had to shop everything online at the height of a pandemic. And I literally was able to furnish my empty apartment downtown LA for a week. So that's, I had a bed, I had my couch, everything. And I came back here in 2021. I set up the first tech-enabled online marketplace for everything home furniture, addressing really the pain points of furniture shopping, especially in a very fragmented market. So that's how it started.
Great, I would need that to furnish my apartment too. Gina, how about you?
I relate so much to both of you. So I also grew up out of the Philippines. I grew up in the UK, and my mom was an OFW. Actually, she was a domestic worker. So one of the pioneering domestic workers who left in the 70s. And so I grew up with a lot of Filipino families. But at that time, I was one of the only kids. So my mom's family friends, you know, would show me pictures of their kids and say, I have a daughter, I have a son your age, but they're back in the Philippines. And so I guess that kind of planted the seed that Filipinos have to leave their kids behind. And then fast forward, when I moved to Singapore in 2010, I still meet so many Filipino domestic workers. And I'm thinking to myself, why is this still a thing, right? So just like Dennis, I wanted to come back to the Philippines and see if there was a way that we could really leverage technology to help Filipino women so that they could find jobs that they can do without leaving their home.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the backstory of your startups. Now, on to Kat, you know, being the CEO of PLDT Global.
Yeah, so,
I'm curious.
Yeah, okay.
Have you always envisioned yourself as a CEO of a giant tech company?
No, but I'm actually the outlier, right? Because I'm not an entrepreneur, which is like super ironic because I belong to and I'm married to an entrepreneurial family. But the thing within PLDT is that the culture is very entrepreneurial, right? Did I envision myself? No. And you know how it is in corporate, right? Sometimes you're the CEO, the next day you're the one baking bread in the kitchen. Sometimes you're the one serving the coffee. It's really just a journey. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Wirin, I'm also curious, what made you decide to become an investor?
Right. So, I mean, I study finance, right? I'm actually Thai, so I grew up in Bangkok. I was born and raised in Bangkok. I moved to Singapore like 8 years ago. And because I study finance, so actually when I was studying, I was reading like a lot of Warren Buffett books. So it was a lot about like, value investing, looking into the fundamental of businesses. And so I've always been in finance. In Singapore, it's like there are a lot of VC funds and something that I can relate when I was, studying a lot of value investing. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, this panel discussion is actually meant to show our audience today the unique perspectives that each of you have in building your careers in your respective industries. And one of our goals is to help the people listening to us today here and online is to understand the challenges you have as women leaders, and of course as a male ally, if there's anything to that point. But in a male-dominated industry, right? And of course, from a male ally's perspective, I want to understand what it's like to be influenced by strong female figures in building your business, because you've given us a little bit of backstory when we were chatting the other day. Let's unpack that a little bit later. But of course, more importantly, we want to talk about how each of you has successfully navigated through your careers to get to where you are today. So our topic today is She Can Have It All. So in your own words, what does it mean when we say she can have it all? Maybe Gina, you want to go ahead first.
So I guess, this is my words, but also speaking on behalf of the members of our community, right? Because we're almost 100,000 strong now in Connected Women.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Most of the time it's about being able to make choices without having to make a sacrifice, right? Because, a lot of the women I meet, regardless of what age group they come from or what background they come from, socioeconomic background they come from, they'll often say, oh, I quit my job because I had to make the sacrifice to take care of my kids, right? Or I had to leave the country, even though I love the Philippines, because I felt that there were better opportunities. So I think, having it all doesn't mean that we don't have to compromise, but I think we should have some opportunity to make the compromises that still bring us happiness, right, in our life and fulfillment. If you're making choices that you feel are a sacrifice, then I think that's really a bad place to be coming from and can create regret, right, and unhappiness.
I get you. How about for the others on the panel? What do you think about that?
So I always consider myself as an accidental entrepreneur. Never in my million years of, when I was in college, I never really think about being an entrepreneur. And fast forward to today, I realize it's hard to sort of like reflect my journey as a founder without really talking about our struggles and challenges. I'm a transgender woman, so I realized as a trans woman, it all boils down to three things, right? Which is all about showing up on job interviews even you're gonna get rejected, showing up on meetings even you'd get intimidated by CEOs on the other side of the table, showing up on VC meetings that most likely will ask for your market size that are very small at the moment, or you don't have a traction or enough traction. So I guess it all boils down to showing up, right? And second, as you show up, you actually meet people who will leave impact in your journey, and these are the people who will help you become successful. And the third one, showing up, you actually take the chance of luck. No? A lot of the many things I achieve is also because there's luck there.
True, I agree there. How about you, Kat?
So I think basically it's about really understanding and accepting yourself, right, at the end of the day, which is not very easy. It took me years, or it's still taking me years, right? I'm still in that journey. And with that acceptance, no regrets, correct? No compromises. It's basically showing up every day and bringing the best part of yourself to the table, right? So,
thank you. How about Dennis and Wirin?
Yeah, so when it comes to that statement of she can have it all, to me, I'd like to step back and look at our country again. Because we came here and we talk a lot about empowering our country with technology, but there's the equality equation that we need to unlock to really empower our country. So if you combine technology and unlock equality, that to me is when we will really get the big impact of changing the socioeconomic landscape of our country. So that is going to be probably the hardest thing that we all have to do. And if I would just boil it down simply, to me, it's a mind game. Everything is mental. before you act, you must think. So if you can't think in the right direction and take those actions properly, you don't even get a chance to find success or failure. So just a few thoughts.
Thank you, Dennis. We're in.
So I guess for me, when it comes to she can have it all, right? It's basically it's you to decide what do you want for your own life, right? I have a friend who is more than happy to sacrifice her career, become a full-time mom, a housewife, and she's happy that way. I have a friend who manages to be a good, mom as well as a good founder, someone who's doing well in her career because she have the good support system around her. And I think that's something that is very important, right? Whether you have a good support system at home as a family or a good support system at work, like your co-workers, your senior management team who is ready to support you and to kind of grow together with you. So it's basically the ability for you to kind of choose your life the way you want it, and not because of social expectation that, or because you're a mom, you need to kind of quit your job and then be a stay-home mom. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So having it all is not an easy kind of endeavor to do as a woman, right? So I want to understand, because you talked about, you want to talk about the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated industry, how you have to kind of differentiate yourself. Or for Gina, of course, how do you empower these women, to really get out there and leave their biases behind as, a woman-only kind of job or a woman-only task at home. So I want to understand, what has been the most challenging situation you found yourselves in as a woman in your chosen industry? Or maybe in your case, Gina, what are the most challenging things you've found in the women that you've been helping throughout the years? And, how did you address that? You can go ahead.
Well, I think I want to bounce this off what Dennis mentioned earlier. I mean, that's one of the key areas that Connected Women is trying to address, helping women adopt technology. And we're talking about women at all levels, right? Because our community is very diverse. So on one hand, we have CEOs in the community, and on the other hand, we have women from the grassroots who come from very disadvantaged backgrounds. So we're really trying to make technology jobs accessible to everyone at scale. So it's a bit of a big vision. But I think, you mentioned mindset. Again, Dennis, I feel a bit like a moderator because I got the special chair, so I'm going to co-moderate.
Yes.
No, but Dennis mentioned earlier a really good point, which was around mindset, right? And so a lot of the women in the artificial intelligence jobs, for example, that we're trying to create, they're not opting in. So we make it very easy for them to participate because we say, who wants to learn skills that they can do from home so that they can earn? It's not like who wants to be an AI, data annotator and maybe become an AI engineer. Nobody will opt in to that, or most won't.
So you change the narrative a little bit to fit what they need at that moment.
Speak to their problem,
yeah,
right?
Correct.
And then
correct. Use their language.
They discover.
Got it. Thank you. How about you, Jules?
So I don't know if female founders can relate, but so I feel like females, because of the stereotypes surrounding female founders, we need to hustle twice than men do. And in my case, I need to hustle thrice, right? So there's a lot of, I think, the biggest challenges of being a female founder is really that expectations surrounding being a female, where you actually have to assume more roles at home. In our case, there's just a lot of stereotypes surrounding us, trans women. So I guess fighting the stereotypes surrounding you as a woman is half the battle. And second is really showing up again and getting things done as a woman. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you. Kat?
So something specific to what I'm actually doing today. So I'm sorry I didn't update it, but I actually stepped away already from that role. My current role now is transformation within PLDT. So I lead that office, and you can just imagine how difficult it is. And when we say, how everybody says, yes, we want to change, yes, let's drop our old ways and start imbibing new ones, the struggle is very real, right? The struggle is real. And it's not something that's just akin to women, right? I think the greatest thing that we're fighting against today within organizations is our ability to listen and our ability to empathize, right? And I say that, and I was glad and I think that's something that startups bring to the table. you've got more of that vis-a-vis larger corporates, right? So that's something that I battle every day, right? So, yeah.
To innovation. Weirin, how about you in the investor space? Any challenges and how did you overcome that?
So I think it goes back, I mean, my way just touch a little bit on the point that maybe there are like fewer female founders as compared to male founders in the industry, right? And yes, actually on the investor side, we do see fewer female investors than male investors, so it's a very kind of male-dominated industry. But I don't think that's really a kind of a challenge or a problem. Maybe as an investor, you look at, businesses in a different way. Sometimes, generally female are maybe a bit more meticulous, more detailed, or some female tend to be less risk averse, right? So if anything, that kind of brings about a very diversified view when you come to look at businesses, look at investment opportunities as a team, and you have a very balanced view. And I think that's something that is a great diversity rather than a challenge. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So Dennis, now I want to understand, how would you describe the experience of working with women throughout your career?
I think.
All right, careful here, Dennis. Okay, careful.
They put me in the hot seat. So for me, actually, I've been really lucky. I grew up with a lot and strong women my entire life. Both of my parents always had their own small business. I'm not sure why, but they decided to have their own. So, my mom went out there and became a fashionista, designer, retail, wholesaler, importer, manufacturer, the whole thing. And I've got 3 sisters. They're very strong, just like her, and of course my my dedicated wife and my daughter. So for me, again, it's always been, you have to have that part of the formula of equality if you really want to innovate, if you really want to break through. Because by definition, what all of us are doing here is to change the game. And if the old was not as much equality, then the new must be that. And so it, to me, is part of the formula of innovation, because that's where the new ideas come from, and that's where the best ideas come from. So I hope everybody can just continue to gain that courage to, no matter what, just speak up. Really simple.
Thank you, Dennis. So now I want to understand from our female guests here, what do you think are the unique advantages of being a woman in your respective fields? They're all looking at me like, this is a very difficult
Simple,
question.
beauty and brains.
Beauty and brains. Use it to your advantage, right? Don't hide it.
No, seriously, I think there's, and I mentioned it earlier, there's this whole thing around, I think we're just more akin to listening. Empathy is also there. So, the problem, I guess, growing up in a super male-dominated industry was that, I guess, and I've been there for more than half my life, okay? So you can just compute. For the first half, moving up the corporate ladder, I found myself becoming and playing with the boys, right? So you become a little bit more masculine yourself, and I don't know if you guys have felt that, right? But then at some point you realize, wait a minute, I'll find my own track, right? And I'll use it. I'll use it to my advantage. And guess what? The conversations have changed. The scales have evened out, right? I think the way we do problem solving today is better. It's more holistic. So there's that. It's real. The women's view into certain problems, right? It's real. It's very different. Yeah, true.
I agree there. Thank you, Kat. How about Jules, Gina, Weirin?
So 50% of our managers are actually female, and in my view, female leaders have an increased capacity. No offense to men, but female leaders have an increased capacity to lead with empathy because they're coming from very different perspective as a mom, of kids, etc. I think women, in my experience, empathy and compassion are really some of the things that I find unique among women.
Thank you.
I totally agree with that, right? Because, female, you can have a lot of roles, and yes, as a male, you can have, you can be a dad, you can be a working man as well. But it comes with a lot more responsibilities, and it doesn't mean that dads don't have, right? Dads still have, and males still have. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree that that kind of the lens that we're wearing when we do towards problem solving or any other kind of investment decision making, right? It brings a different perspective, and yeah.
Thanks, Gina. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a lot. I'll make it quick. This is a really tricky question, actually, because it depends on where you're coming from, right? But I think from my perspective, let me answer the first one first, and then I'll do a quick comment on the answers. So the first one is, I think what women bring to the table is their unique perspective as women. The same way that a trans woman would bring her unique perspective as a trans woman, or a man would bring his perspective as a man or a dad or whatever else. So I think what's really important is that diversity, right? We can only help people as much as we understand their challenges. So, having women on boards, for example, having women investors is so important, because if we don't have representation of all different types of people in all different scenarios, then there's always going to be some perspective that we're missing out on. I mean, I've been in the gender empowerment space for 17 years now, so I kind of probably have a little bit of edge in terms of that question. But I think we need to look at traits. I mean, everyone has these traits, right? Nurturing, compassion, strength, and all the rest. But we're often raised in such a way that boys are told to be strong, women are expected to be nurturing because of the roles that we've played traditionally. So I think as gender definitions start to change and become less traditional or old-fashioned, then I think we'll start to allow our men to also show some of the feminine traits that we need in all types of leadership, right? And same for women.
Thank you.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you for making me unique today. So, if it's okay, I'd like to challenge everybody, because great question about because we have to work together to figure out the disadvantages. But what if for a minute we were to look at this as an advantage versus a disadvantage? Just for a second, if you look at things in the world like supply and demand, and when there's less supply, that makes you unique. And when you're unique, there's an advantage. And today, I think there's definitely less and hopefully more women in business and tech. So to me, I think now is the time for women to play a more active and a bigger role because of those unique perspectives. And that is every person's opportunity here. So it's up to you to take that step. So just a challenging thought that you can turn this into an advantage, right? Because you don't want to go into a market where you're just like everybody else. You want to be unique, right? Just a thought.
So coming into that, what you just said, one of the hottest topics we had prior to this session when we had the call earlier was the lack of women in tech, right? We had that discussion. So I did some research and found the following, like I promised you. So there's 3 statistics here. And of course, the statistics that was presented earlier by, I think, Catherine. A 2022 study by BCG and Singapore's Infocom Media Development Authority has shown that the tech industry is getting more diverse, as women make up 28% of the tech sector workforce worldwide. The good thing is, leading the change is Southeast Asia, where women account for 32% of tech talent in the tech sector. But as in most research on women in the tech sector, the higher we look up the ladder, the greater the shrinkage we see in women on top. That's the first one. In the Fortune 500, only 41 companies have female CEOs, which is less than 10% of the population. 77% of VCs in Southeast Asia alone do not have female decision makers. So the question is, why do you think there's a shortage of women in the upper management? Everyone's looking at Kat, they're like,
You know, that's true. particularly in our company, we're actually, despite the fact that we're in, not even tech, it's more telco, right? Which is very industrial. 60% of the workforce is female, right? And you have more and more engineers, female engineers coming to the fore, very good. But as you move up the ladder, at the officer level, I think we only end up at 30, and don't even ask what the very top looks like, right? Why? I don't know. Can you give me some? Well, okay. I think I summarized it when we spoke. I said, well, women want it.
Yeah.
Right? They want it. And unfortunately, you're working against maybe bias. Today, you're working against politics. I'll call it out. You're working against a lot of things, right, in very large-scale organizations. I think it was mentioned earlier, another reality is confidence, right? So I'm not sure whether this is a stigma to a sense, maybe the way, we grew up where the boys played basketball and the girls had to stay in and cook or clean the table or something. No, I hear a lot of that, correct? So I think it's that. But my 2 cents to all the women in the room who are maybe in the same situation I'm in, you have to want it, right? So what I always do is beyond just looking at the job, I look at the why. Why am I doing this? Why am I here, right? And then you've just got to pull and say, you're as resilient as everybody else.
Yeah. Agree. So, Gina, I want to know your thoughts on this. Seeing a lot of, you've helped a lot of women. Why do you think that's the case?
So I think the traditional workplace is not really set up to support women, right? I mean, the hours in the day on top of the unpaid care work that women typically still take on. I know this is changing. There's a lot of progressive families, progressive men that are doing their part, but it's just the way that it has been for so long, right? I have a family of all, 3 sons and my husband, and I still pick up more of the work sometimes, and then I'm like, I'm supposed to be a feminist. I'm disappointed in myself. It's just hard work being a feminist when you're raising a family. But I think we have to make it easier for women to stay in the workforce, right? And we have to make it easier for women to access the workforce. And we have to make it easier for women to get back into the workforce. Because if you take a break to have kids and you have a 5-year gap on your CV, good luck, right? You won't even make it to the interview. And that's why a lot of women start up businesses after they've had kids, right? Because they need another option, because the option they had that they thought they were going to do, the career path, has now been possibly taken away from them or doesn't look as attractive anymore.
Thank you for that, Gina. So I do have a question for Wirin as an investor, though. What differences do you see between male and female founded startups? And why do you think there's not enough representation of women in the startup space?
Yeah. Okay, I'll jump to the second part first, right? Why do I not see a lot of female?
Yeah.
And again, I totally agree with Kat, right? That you have to want it, right? And I mean, if you go back a little bit more, I think it's a natural progression where in the older generations, a lot of female were, expected to kind of, once you give birth, then you stay home, you become a mom. But as women get more education, women have more opportunities in the workforce, then now we are seeing more and more women, right? So to begin with, it's just a natural progression that nowadays we don't really see a lot of female founders or even female investors. But I'm sure stats are showing, increasing number of women in the industry. And the differences in terms of, between male and female founders, to be honest, I don't think the difference actually comes from gender differences. It's really, it's basically male founders can be a bad operator also. It's not just because, you're female, so you have less way of critical thinking or you're something wrong with you, right? So, I don't think there's any kind of stark differences between male and female founders. If anything, it's not because of the gender. Yeah.
Cool. Now, if you can give some concrete examples based on your experiences, what do you think we can do better as an organization or as an individual to encourage more women to participate in the tech ecosystem across the board and actually, put their hands up and say, I want that management position or I want to be in the C-suite? So what do you think are the concrete things we can do to enable that? Yes, Jules.
I think I think we founders and organizations, leaders in organizations, should be very intentional about hiring women, not preference. Has to be intentional. And I think other organizations nowadays, Microsoft is very intentional. We want a woman for this specific tech position. And I think us leaders should also create an environment where women can succeed. For instance, concrete example, right? In the agency I used to work with, we seem to be glamorizing that, the toxic corporate culture of long hours. And I feel like if we try to perpetuate this culture, we actually intimidate women to become leaders, because we know long hours actually restrict them from doing many other roles, for instance, in their household. So I think, one, we need to articulate that we want women for the role, and second, we need to create a culture where we actually empower women to be leaders.
Thank you for that, Jules. Dennis, how about you?
I like to keep things simple. I think we should just have more one-on-one conversations and just help each other. I think men help women, women help men. We can learn a lot. The other side can learn a lot. And that's, to me, just working together. Sorry, there's no magic formula, in my opinion, but I think if we do that alone. And so having sometimes just role-playing conversations. What would life be like if you had this option or that option? And just, at the leadership level, from a man's point of view, I guess we need to take more steps to open those conversations up, because sometimes they can feel awkward, right? And you just have to open up the door, I guess.
Thank you, Dennis. Anyone else?
So, it's important to have a great support system, right? And as an organization, what you can do to kind of help women is, having a flexible hours, which I'm sure everyone knows that with COVID, you can work anytime, you can do on Zoom. Sometimes, mothers have to go and pick up their kids from school at 4 o'clock, and, having a flexible hours, you don't need to kind of show up in office all the time. That actually helps a lot. So having a conversation, understand the kind of needs that will come with that particular mother or women, and then having an open-minded about having that person in the organization. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so since we only have 10 minutes left, I kind of want to get into the next set of questions. So Bella earlier talked about imposter syndrome, right? She said that, if we can get over that, that would be great. But I'm sure there are some people here in the audience today, or probably, young women listening to us online who are battling imposter syndrome, always thinking that you're not good enough, that you're never going to be good enough, or that someone else is better than you. Have you ever experienced this in your respective journeys as a CEO, as a startup founder, or in any point of your career? And how do you battle that, or have you been able to successfully battle, fight that?
Yeah, so I'll take that. I battle it every day. And for all the roles that I play, including being a mother. But the reality is, I look back and I laugh, because now I see it as part of just, the whole journey of learning and of finding yourself, right? Because you'll never know until you try, right? And my wise boss once told me, you just have to keep faking it until you make it.
Thank you for that, Kat. How about you, Gina?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, right? It means you're stepping up. It means you're out of your comfort zone again. It means you're stretching yourself. So I think we just need to be a little bit self-aware, right? Like if you're going through this suddenly, just ask yourself the question: is it because you're taking on board something negative that someone said to you, that you perceived that someone said about you? Or is it because you're actually stepping up and you're doing something more difficult, and you should be a little bit afraid, and it's okay, right? But you always have to put that negative voice to bed, and make sure that you have enough positive voices either in your head or around you. So that you can get through these level ups.
Thank you, Gina. Jules, wherein? Dennis? Or I'll go ahead.
I'm still thinking. That's a deep one.
Jules.
I think as an early stage startup founder, every day is really just a constant battle of validation, finding that customer. Now we're fundraising in this macroeconomic environment. Every day is an imposter syndrome, right? So rejections after rejections, I think is a critically important process in setting yourself up for success. So I think that's really part of the journey. That's the reality.
Thank you. That's super honest, though. Thank you so much for your honesty. Wirin?
Well, I think you just have to kind of live with the fact that everyone will make mistakes, right? And if you're nervous, have self-doubts, and then eventually if you fail, then that's it. Then you fail, then you get up again the next day, and then you start over again. That's not the end of life, right? Yeah.
Thank you. Dennis?
Okay, had some time. Thank you. I think if I try to understand why it happens, why imposter syndrome happens, to me, I would change or replace the word imposter syndrome to distractions, right? Imposter syndrome comes up because of distractions, because of opportunities that you might think are right for you. Therefore, you get tempted to do that without, like someone said earlier, knowing who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you want. Because that's when you start to try to do all kinds of different things that become distractions, and then you get lost, right? So I don't know. That's how I would maybe overcome that.
Remove distractions. Okay, so you told us about that journey on, overcoming imposter syndrome. So another thing that we want to understand is there a difference between who you are today, where you are in your career, versus who you were when you were just starting out or just early in your career? What's the stark difference between Gina, say, 10 years ago, or you 10 years ago?
It's a blur.
Too much alcohol during those periods of time.
Yeah, for me, that's a big difference. So my version of me today has a lot more confidence than the same version of me like 10 years ago, or even like 5 years ago. And it's because of the society that I'm in, the environment that I'm in, that gives me opportunity to kind of step up and do what I want to do. And sometimes do what I don't want to do, but I think I can do it, and then I have to overcome the fear. And it's a very important, again, go back to my very original point, you need to have a very strong support system. So for you also, remember that you should be a strong support system for people who are within your circle, whether it's family or friends or colleagues, right? And that's very important. Yeah.
Thanks, Wirin. Jules? Kat?
It's so funny when you ask that question. The first thing that came to my mind was, well, I'm X pounds more. I can't run as fast. My body aches when I get up in the morning. I can't hold my alcohol. I drink and it takes 2 days for me. So that was where I was going. But I think in reality, the difference is I'm kinder to myself. And hopefully from then, I'm kinder to everybody around me and kinder to everything else in the world. So it's just really the way I look at things. Right?
Beautiful. Thank you. Jules?
Great transformation. 15 right? 15 years, I've transformed a lot, I guess, right? I think the word is I'm more self-aware. I think as a leader and what I've achieved, small and big, it's really that being aware that so many people actually help you become who you are now. You have better control of yourself, I guess, 15 years into leadership position. That's, I guess, my transformation.
Thank you. Gina?
Well, I never thought I'd be sitting here doing the things that I'm doing right now, that's for sure. I just kept taking one step at a time, and one thing led me to the next. And I guess saying yes and saying no to different things created all these parallel universes. Sorry. But I think I just don't take myself as seriously now. That relieves a lot of pressure, right? I mean, I've already been through a lot of embarrassing failures and some successes. So it's a cycle, right? You just have to ride the waves, ride the cycle, and you'll come out the other end. But try not to take it too seriously, because otherwise life's too short, right? if you're not having fun.
True. Thank you. Dennis.
Yeah, I was a completely different person 10 years ago. I was in corporate America helping build SaaS companies, and my goals were very different. I wanted the big job title. I wanted all the responsibility. I wanted the big paycheck. I wanted all that stuff. And then I was still like unhappy. Very, very sad, right? And then when the right timing came to change the direction of my life and, move my entire life to the Philippines, I can say that was the best decision I ever made. It's like I have, as they say, have not worked a day in my life. I think it was the entrepreneurial animal that was kind of constrained in a company, going after the wrong thing, playing the wrong game. So luckily, Prosperna and our customers, our employees, we're all sharing this great vision to help our country, and I hope that we can share that same kind of inspiration for others, for our country.
Sorry. Thank you. So, thank you, Dennis. Finally, before we end this, I think this is a question that a lot of people would want answers to. How do you think we can build a community of like-minded female entrepreneurs and male allies to serve as a support or network system? What do you advise that people do if they're in this stage in their lives where they really want support? For startup founders that probably need, people to listen to them. Like what you said, so surrounding yourself with the right people is very helpful in your process from before up to where you are now. How do we make that happen? So let's end with that.
Happy hour.
We'll have it later. But Gina, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I think, the communities are, different segments of communities have very different needs, right? Like there's Connected Women who is tackling one problem, there's you guys who are tackling a different part of the problem. So I think we really, obviously communities like this where we get to reconvene and share is really good. But let's all focus on our individual, very niche and very specific problem. Because I find in the women's space, people tend to throw all the women's problems into one bucket. And it's not that simple. It's actually very, very complicated, right? At all the different layers and all the different levels. So let's find those special areas that we can really focus on and really make a real impact. Yeah. And then let's keep talking so that we can help each other as well.
Thank you. Kat?
I would say, take every day as it comes, right? In building an ecosystem, every single part of society has a place, right? And is a part of the puzzle, correct? From government to the academe to the private sector. I think everybody, but where can we specifically make a difference? Dennis mentioned this earlier. I recently took a course on coaching. Yeah, so it's individual, it's one-on-one, right? And it's regardless of women or men. I feel that's how leaders can make a big impact. Right, or the biggest impact at this point. And for you guys out there, when in doubt, consult. Find a friend, a mentor, a coach, whatever has it, right? And just trust the process. Just trust the process.
Thanks, Kat. Anyone else want to close it off?
I'd just like to throw something out there that we like to do. And, because we like to look ahead and build our company like this thing or entity or being on its own, that it can thrive and create its own persona as a collective group or collective set of parts. So I encourage leaders, whether you're a man or a woman, to think about your organization and go through these what-if scenarios. What would your organization look like if this person or that person, or it was put together in this way or that way? I think we've got to be that conscious about how you create your business, your ecosystem, and customers. And it's just, you got to set time aside for that to role play through those scenarios in your mind. And it's amazing how clear things will get. and how much opportunity you'll find. The possibilities when you think of what if this person or that person, it can be just, it's like the light. Sorry. Weirded some people out there. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else want to close it? Are we good? You guys good? Yeah? Thank you so much. That ends the panel. At the end of the day, I think we really can have it all. Surround yourself with the right people, and you have to want it. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Would like to request the Katrina Chan to join them as well. From PH, so Philippine to be here today. I'm JJ Erpai-Boon. Can you guys hear me in the back? Okay. So my name is JJ Erpai-Boon. I'm diversity lead at Gobi Partners. For those of you who don't know Gobi Partners, we're a Pan-Asian venture capital firm, and we run the Gobi Core Fund here in the Philippines. And fun fact, we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year, so it's really a privilege for me to be, thank you, to be sharing what we've been doing to push gender-smart investing in the region. I want to start off by sharing a little story of why I lead diversity initiatives at Gobi. And that's really because I was inspired by our former female partner at Gobi called Shannon Kalyanamit. Some of you may know her. And I was onboarded to help her with fundraising, which is not an easy task to begin with when you first start off in BC. And so we would be going out into these fundraising meetings, and usually, you know, with startups and investors, we were the only women in the room. And that was really frustrating for me at the time. But what really kept me going was to have a strong female mentor and a role model who kind of showed me the way and kind of see how she tackles these tough questions, conscious biases, and all that. So I was really grateful to her for that. And yeah, so, you know, for me and Shannon, we saw a big problem. You know, the gender gap in BC was a big problem. but we also saw that as a really huge untapped opportunity. If you go to the next slide. So looking at Southeast Asia, we see that VC funding going to gender diverse investments sits at 17%. But if, Grab makes up most of that because they raised over $2 billion before their IPO in 2021. So if you exclude Grab, the percentage is actually 9%. And if you zoom in on only all female founding teams, it's less than 1%, which is a pretty stark contrast. So there's a huge problem here, and clearly something needs to change. So one of the problem lies at the top. It's easier for male founding teams to get funding because a lot of the VC decision makers are males. A report by Kaufman Fellows found that female VC partners are 2 times more likely to invest in startups with at least one female founder. But in Southeast Asia, 77% of VC firms in Southeast Asia lack a VC female in the investment decision-making role, which is a stat shared before. So we've spoken to a lot of our great women founders in our portfolio, and they do say that the salient problem is fundraising. Some of the problems are more universal. It's harder to fundraise while you're trying to grow your business, but some of them are more female focused, tackling unconscious biases and work-life balance, everything that we talked about in the previous panel. So there's a lot of work to be done to nurture the ecosystem. And for a VC, that really starts with benchmarking, setting targets, implementing programs, and monitoring and, making progress. So that's exactly what Gobi has done. Next slide. We made a public commitment back in 2018 to invest $50 million into female-led venture firms. And 2 years later, we met that goal and also exceeded it by a little bit. So we believe, this is just, improving access to finance for female founders. Next slide. We believe it takes a lot more than just access to capital, but also building the whole ecosystem. So what we've done is hosted a Gender Smart Investing Forum along with UN Women, and that was really successful. That was last year. We attracted over 400 senior and mid-level executives to come and learn about gender smart investing. The second is we host an annual pitch competition, Gender Lens Pitch Competition, with our dear friends at She Loves Tech. And then lastly, we also do mentorship and advocacy, recently working with W20 Indonesia, which is part of the G20 presidency. Next slide. And so part of our work is also looking back at that 50 million that we invested in 2021. Through that time, through the 2-year period of our pledge, we made around 150 investments, and we looked at the statistics and found really compelling and favorable results to gender diverse teams. It's really interesting what we found. Our portfolio in ASEAN and Hong Kong, 43% of our portfolio is consisted of gender diverse teams. But gender diverse teams make up 59% of our holding value, and that alone is a compelling business case for us. We also found that gender diverse teams are achieving 94% higher MOIC than their all-male counterparts. And then a third statistic is their increased ability to raise up rounds. Gender diverse teams are 2 times more likely to raise up rounds than their all-male counterparts. So this, for us, really proved that our pledge was, we were very happy with our pledge, and this is something we wanted to share today. Hopefully it sparks any ideas for you guys here. And within that, we've been fortunate to have worked with really great female founders here in the Philippines, female founders, C-suites, and also with our team on the ground here, Gobi Core. They're actively sourcing, speaking to founders on the ground. We also have accumulated a very comprehensive data set that showed that here in the Philippines, the gender gap ratio in 2020 was 1 to 2, which was a massive improvement from 1 to 5 in 2015. Next slide. But also, because of COVID, it's become stagnant. We've looked at startups that's received over 500K in funding, and as you can see here, it's pretty stagnant from 2020 onwards, staying at 30% of gender diverse founding teams in the ecosystem. So there's clearly something that needs to be done here. But fortunately, next slide, we're seeing a lot of women coming into the limelight, a lot of great female founders that we met here today. So we have a lot of hope in the Philippines to move, for the Philippines female founders to move the needle, that 9%. So, and we also have a we see a very supportive ecosystem in the Philippines, with organizations like Cubo, Vilgro, and Saskao Peace Foundation investing in women. So it's really an interesting space for us to be here. Which brings me to my last slide. I'm bringing this statistic again because this is what I want us to think about going into the next panel, is that 9% of VC funding in Southeast Asia goes to gender diverse teams. The statistic is even smaller for all female founding teams. And I'd like to quote our founder, Tom, who likes to bring up the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a community to raise a startup, and it takes an ecosystem to have the startup have wings. So I'd like to leave you with one lasting thought. How can we create a more inclusive ecosystem for female founders here in the Philippines? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss JJ Airpine. Would please stay on stage for a photo op with Miss Katrina Chan.
I needed the height boost daw, kaya... Okay. So, I know it's getting late. And, ay, ito na lang. Sorry, nag-set up lang kami. Huwag naman sobrang edge, kuya. Okay. So, I hope everyone's feeling okay. I know it's the afternoon. I'm serving drinks pretty soon. So this is the last panel for the Startup Pinay Conference. And it's a doozy. It's an important one. So probably our most requested topic, actually. So for the female founders, they're still here, and those watching online, though. It's all about fundraising. JJ was talking earlier about the gaps in fundraising, especially. So the data, it shows it. It's there. Our panel one was maybe a bit more on the hugot side, right? So I don't know if I got some pretty deep insights there earlier, but for this one, we're really here to talk about, I guess, a bit more about the numbers, right? And, you know, again, can't deny the data. But anyway, so just to maybe recap some of those points, right? So in terms of especially all women teams in Southeast Asia, it's funding for all female teams in Southeast Asia stands at less than 1%. Less than 1% of all the total funding. It's crazy. Globally, it's around 2%, which is not much better. And then 77% of Southeast Asian investors, VCs, don't have a female investor. That's just a fact, right? So if you're pitching to a VC, right, chances are there isn't a girl there that's like listening to you. And the disparity has stayed stagnant. It hasn't really improved as much as the ecosystem has improved, maybe in leaps and bounds. We can't say the same now about the funding side of things. So anyway, so that's really what we're going to be tackling in the next 40 or so minutes. I have a big but amazing panel here, and I will ask them to actually introduce themselves. And you know, maybe in that context also, like how you're related to like what your experience in fundraising, whether you're a fund giver or a fundraiser, right? Or trying to. So maybe I'll start with you, Alex.
Hi. Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Gentry. I am the co-founder of Sprout Solutions. So we are an HR technology platform that is based in the Philippines. I am a raiser, not a giver. Hopefully a giver in the future, but right now a raiser.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, next.
Hi, I'm Crystal. I'm the co-founder of Picaroo. Picaroo is an all-in-one on-demand delivery app. So we have everything you could possibly need to get in an hour, from food, groceries. We deliver a whole mall. Everything you would need in that mall, we can have it to you in an hour or less. And I'm also in the middle of fundraising with my co-founder, Kevin Tan. We're still in the middle of it, but our seed fund is from the Mega World Group. So that's where we got our first, I think now it's almost over $6 million. But now we're also getting external funding, and we're right in the middle of it. So yes, we're also a racer. Yeah, we're in the exciting times.
Thanks, Crystal. And our gentleman in this panel, or male ally in this panel.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Paulo. I'm the principal at Action Venture Lab. We are a global fund that invests in early stage fintech for inclusion startups. I lead the work here in Southeast Asia, based out of Manila. And yes, we're on the other side, we're on the investing side.
Thank you, Paulo. Next, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Patricia. I am one of the general partners of SeedStars International Ventures. We're an early stage VC fund. We focus in fintech and commerce. I'm originally from Jakarta. It's great to be back in the Philippines again. And as a VC fund, we're both a giver and a raiser. So we feel your pain as well.
Hi, my name is Nisha, and I lead startup business development for AWS for Philippines and for Thailand. For us at AWS, we want to help startups to grow and to scale, and we do that largely through 3 areas. So one, around financial support, secondly is mentorship, and thirdly is in terms of go-to-market. So from this angle, we are a giver. But also in my past life, I used to co-found an OTT startup, so think Netflix clone. So this was based in Thailand. We used to compete with iFlix and Hook back in the days, raise some money. So yeah, so my experience was also on the asking side as well.
Last but not the least, Alali.
Hi, I'm Alali. I am head of operations and special projects at Zendik Philippines. So I'm not an investor nor a co-founder, but I'm here to give you context on how it is like to work in a tech company that started in Indonesia, expanded in the Philippines during the pandemic, and how is it like working in a big tech startup.
All right, there you have it, guys. And of course, I'm Kat Chan. I'm your moderator, but also I guess we write small checks. We've definitely worked with a lot of founders that are fundraising, and again, what most requested topic. So just to recap, in our panel today, like on that far end are our Startup Pinay founders, people that are raising money. Here in the middle, they occasionally have to raise money from other people, but for the most part, they're writing checks. So remember their faces. Also, Paolo and Action Venture Labs is paying for your snacks right now, so let's thank him for that. Yes. And then on this side are, people from organizations that have maybe too much money to play around with. No, I'm kidding. But, so this is like when you have the fuel to scale, right? These, like working in an organization perhaps with less funding constraints, right? And how that works out. That's a, I guess, totally different experience. So, like, those are the different perspectives that we're coming from. So okay, I'm kind of gonna structure this in 3 parts, and I think I kind of want to start with tackling this, these perceptions, like these experiences, right? So, I guess when it comes to funding, I suppose again the data is very clear that there is a disparity, but I guess my first question is, especially for those that have fundraised, like, have you experienced this? Like, do you think your gender, right, like, plays a role or makes a difference in your fundraising experience? Perhaps same with the investors, right? Like, does it actually matter, at least from your perspective? And maybe more importantly, what I'd want to ask is, why do you think it matters, or why is there a disparity, right? So, anyone want to start or share first?
Hello, there, it's working. Based on my experience, I haven't really felt any disparity. I feel like, especially, I think it started around 2020, I feel like it's more an opportunity more than anything. So my co-founder is actually male also. So Kevin Tan is both male and a conglomerate CEO and empire holder, billionaire. So, but in our case, specific for Picaroo, we feel like, having females, having moms, it's definitely been an advantage in a way. I think also if you compare Picaroo, and we have food, groceries, and shops and malls, these are the type of service we have actually caters more to moms and females. So obviously, I think compared to our competitors, even in the grocery space and even in the food space, it's run by men. Their founders are actually men, and I guess this is also what made Picaroo gain advantage in less than 2 years. We grew over 400%. It's exactly because of that female touch that me, and not just me, but like there's other members in the team that are moms and female as well. So in our specific case, I feel like it's been an edge so far. And even talking with investors, interested investors, that's usually one of the things they mentioned that interested them. That first of all, there's not a lot that they get to talk to that involve like a female founder, and they like that there's the female aspect, like a different perspective also for them.
That's interesting, because I think that's something that Bella mentioned as well, where being a female is actually an advantage in your case, right? Or having that sort of understanding of the market. Is this something that, I know, anyone else care to share though? Yeah, maybe Alex. Yeah.
For me, I think my gender was a little bit interesting only because of my dynamic with my co-founder. So I am one half of a husband and wife founding team. So it made it very interesting, right? Most especially for our seed round, because it was parang cute. Oh, husband and wife co-founder trying to build a SaaS business in the Philippines. For sure, I think when we went to our A round, it was a little bit harder because, it still kind of had that mom and pop vibe when we were a scale up at that point in time. But one thing that I'd like to say about kind of fundraising as a woman founder is that I think that most especially in the Philippines, so we started this whole journey when, like 2015, right? Started fundraising, I want to say
2017. We were bootstrapped for those first 2 years. The landscape has changed so much for the better, so much. At that point in time, like, I could hardly find another Filipina founder.
Right.
There were so few. When we started in Endeavor, I was the second Filipina founder there. So I am so amazed at how just in the last number of years, the ecosystem has grown, the community has grown, the support for Filipina founders has grown so much, to the point that what Crystal was saying is that it's then become an advantage, right? At that point in time, there were no specific funds or specific pitches that are just for Filipina founders. And now we have this whole day that's what we're talking about.
That's right.
So yeah, it's just been a really kind of a big change for me, like from where I stand.
I guess before we move on to the investors though, like I am curious, when both of you were doing your fundraising, like were you the ones leading the fundraising or did you kind of leave that to your male co-founders or partners?
For our seed round, it was us, like super us, at the same time. For our Series A, I was giving birth literally. I was in the middle of my last trimester. And so a lot of the last stage, it was just my co-founder and my husband. Like, I gave birth and then we woke up the next morning and he had to run and meet an investor and do a pitch. Like, it was like that.
I know this is off topic, but I know in your case, Crystal, you've also been pregnant while
Yes.
birthing startups.
So yeah,
right?
the power of women, right? So you can do both. So same with Alex. So and actually we know each other from way back. That's why we're close. Because our kids are classmates.
are in the
They
same
grew up
place.
together. And I've seen her pregnant. She's seen me pregnant. And yes, we were. I was also pregnant for my third child, launching Picaroo, and fundraising, and same with the other companies I launched. I was actually both pregnant and also running the business. So yeah, in our case, specific for the fundraising, I'm more focused on it because, as you know, Kevin Tan is actually running a lot of other billion-dollar companies and empires. But I think what's surprising to many, and I'm very proud to share it, like he really is very hands-on, and he always says like Picaroo is his own first baby in a way, because all the others, you know, it's something he inherited from his father and the company and all that, but Picaroo is something we really started from scratch. So even the fundraising, although I had to do all the number side and the decks and everything, but all the pitches, Kevin is there. So we're really both the one pitching together.
All right, so I guess, again, time to move on to the investors as promised earlier. So what were your observations in terms of disparity? And again, more importantly, why do you think that's happening? Is that also happening in your own portfolios, right?
Yeah, happy to kick things off. I mean, yeah, you're right, Kat. There's definitely a disparity, right? I mean, the numbers speak for itself. I mean, it's great to hear that things are improving, but globally, right? So it's not just here in the Philippines, not just here in Southeast Asia. There is that gap. You know, it's normally, as mentioned, less than 2% of startups, female-founded startups, are getting funded. I think it's less than 20% if it's mixed, right? So I mean, it's female-founded startups are getting a sliver of funds, right? So I think there definitely is that gap, and I think I'm very fortunate that the fund I work for, you know, I mean, we're very, you know, we're women-led, right? So I have a women co-managing partner. About almost 50% of our team is women. So from the associate level up to the managing partner level, right? So I think we're very fortunate to have a fund that's very focused on this, you know, in such that, you know, I mean, why we chose this session to support is because, you know, we have an internal GLI mission, right? We want to push forward gender lens in all emerging markets that we work for as much as possible, because it is an issue, right? And I think, you know, we've been studying it a bit, and I think from where you started, Kat, I think it's really there that the algorithm is sexist, right? I mean, we've realized that, you know, even the way, you know, where you're sourcing, right? You know, where VCs normally source from their friends, from their from their community, but underrepresented founders, women founders, they're normally not in that immediate community, so it makes it harder. Or sometimes even the due diligence questions, there can be some biases there. We've found out that normally if it's a women founder, VCs are asking more about protecting the downside versus the scalability. So all of that exists across the investment spectrum. So for us, what we're trying to do is be mindful of it, be thoughtful of it, and then proactively try to improve it in not only in our fund, but hopefully everywhere else as well.
What about you, Patricia? I think in one of our pre-session chats, like you kind of talked about the sort of data-driven approach that you're applying at SeedStars to kind of take out maybe some of the biases, right? Could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So maybe I can just take a step back and share a little bit about how our portfolio looks like within SeedStars, right? So there is still a disparity. I'm happy to share that 26% of our portfolio in Fund 1 has a female co-founder or somebody in the leadership position. We are, I think, within SeedStars as an organization, we've been committed to gender inclusivity for a long time. So we also have a 50-50 gender balance team, which I think is actually important in in influencing the investment decision. And the data-driven idea comes from the fact that I think there's a lot of biases that investors have, myself included, when we are looking at investments, right? I think, I think there's been an index of how a successful founder look like and sound like, and a lot of that index has been based on your typical, let's say, Silicon Valley, kind of bros.
What works before? Or something.
What works before and what we've seen before, right? And so, so we know the stats. So one of the ways that we try to do that is that, we really try to kind of centralize all of our sourcing, where everybody just applies through a centralized platform. We look, we ask questions where, it's really focused on the metrics, on your business model. But we also, on the flip side of that, we do really put in an effort into sourcing in places where maybe it's not the easiest level, right? Like Paolo mentioned, like usually you source from, your network, your founders, and if your network of founders are also mostly men, they're gonna bring up other guys, right? And I think in a way, VC can be a bit of a closed door, and I think for me, it's really important to build an ecosystem and network for female founders to be comfortable, but also at the same time to also mix in more, right? And I think what, you mentioned about being both equally active in the fundraising part, I think it's super important.
Yeah, I'd like to expand a little bit more on what you're saying also, Patricia, on the biases. So, well, it's important to be data-driven, but at the same time, if we're looking back in terms of like the pitch, right, of what founders are pitching, like between male and female, you're actually seeing different data set, right? Typically, okay, maybe it's a bit of a too much generalization, but typically you see like, okay, the market size, the total, market penetration like rate from men, like they tend to basically like over forecast. And like the vision tend to be very big. Okay, we're going to be able to do, multi-billion-dollar market, $100 billion TAM, for example. And then when you look at women data and what they're actually presenting in the pitch, it'll be like, yeah, we're going to be very conservative. Like this is like, maybe what we can do today. So they think it's very much thinking of like, okay, what we have today, historical versus, okay, you know what, this is the dream. Like we're going to be a $30 billion, $50 billion, right? So it comes back to, even if you're doing the same business, right? How do you think about data? How you think about your total, total addressable market can depend like whether you're male or female, and that's something that, and I think founders should also recognize that, like that's an area that maybe we can also work on as well.
Maybe just to add one more thing on that, I think it's also about knowing your investors, right? Knowing what kind of business you are, what kind of business you have, what business you want to have. It's very different raising funding for like a cash flow kind of positive business versus like a VC model. So I think, you know, you need to know your market in terms of investors too, and, you know, target your pitch, you know, effectively that way.
Definitely. And I guess, Aleli, like, and I definitely want to get back to that actually, like finding your fit in your investors, right? But like, I am curious from your perspective, I mean, in terms of tech startup fundraising, right? Like, there seems, again, we've been talking about this gap like for the past 10, 20 minutes, right? But you know, when people think about the Philippines, they even say like, you know, we're gender biased in the opposite direction, right? Like many more female business owners in general, non-tech, like consumer decisions being made by women, female presidents, Supreme Court justices, what have you, right? So I suppose when you look at, you know, the things that you're, like the transactions you're processing through Sendit, or even like within your own workforce, like, are you seeing similar challenges, I suppose, that the tech ecosystem is seeing now? Because I would think maybe not. And is there something we can learn from the tech industry to kind of more closely align with how we're doing so great in gender in practically every other sense, right? So, yeah.
No, I think that's fair. That's a fair assessment. I think in reality, we need to establish first that the problem exists. And I think that's the first step. Fundamentally, you are going to design your processes, your strategies in terms of improving your workplace to be more friendly or more attractive to women leaders. I think at Zendit, I am very proud to say that right now at this point in time, 45% of our management team is actually female. And I think that's a good step in terms of attracting more talents in the Philippines for engineering, for tech, wherein it's driven by male applicants, right? So what we did, for example, is in terms of referring more talents internally, you would have a better incentive, or like 2x, for example, when you refer a woman in technology. So I think those little things in creating more, like an empowered environment for all women leaders to step up. Lastly, I think in terms of mentorship, I think the environment that you are living in, if you think that you will thrive there, if you think you're being supported, if you think you have a path towards going towards the role that you want to be in, regardless of your gender, I think that's also a good way to encourage more women leaders to step up. So right now, for example, in Zendit Philippines, when we expanded our founding team, our management, our CEO in the Philippines, Yang, so she created this 5-man team wherein everyone was just doing a little bit of everything regardless of your gender, regardless of like if you're an expert in tech, in terms of product management, in terms of operations, whatever you want to do or how do you want to grow, it really is up to you. So I think that's a good way to make this like a work in progress type of thing.
No, that's a really interesting kind of thing to share, right? Like, I guess one other thing that you will notice that there are a lot of women leaders in the tech industry, right? Like, not necessarily founders, so again, congrats ladies on that end for taking the leap and starting something. But I'm not sure if like the audience knows, but you know, I think the country heads of companies like Sendit, of Grab, of Google, of Zoom, of you name it, like all the big tech companies, like they're all led by women here in the Philippines. So it seems like there is that sort of push, and you know, again, with the right kind of environment, right, to have women in leadership roles. I don't think that's the issue, but again, maybe this fundraising part is still the tough nut to crack, right? And so I think I'm gonna kind of start to, you know, try to land this plane, right? And I think what everyone here really wants to know is like, how do we raise money, especially for women, right? And you know, there are all these theories, right? Like, are people guessing all the time, like, oh, is it the TAM isn't big enough, or the women just don't exist, or the ideas of girls are too girl-focused. I don't know, right? Like, so I guess I kind of want to make this panel as practical and advice-filled as possible. So I will go down the line, and I want to ask, like, you know, what do you think is your kind of big advice to women that are fundraising? What should they be doing, focusing on, right, thinking about to help them raise more, to maybe have more of them actually start raising, right? And again, get some fuel in those gas tanks, right? Especially maybe in this context also where it's a challenging fundraising environment for everyone. Hopefully less than 1% can't get any worse, but you know, like I would love to ask everybody in this panel if you could share your piece of advice, especially for women that are raising money and trying to scale up, right? So if you don't mind, I'll start with you and then we'll go this way this time.
I think you should always start with solving a problem or a pain point. It's always about that and creating a solution around that. Launching a product first that customers would really love. Regardless of like what is your industry, if it's tech, e-commerce, if it's fintech, it doesn't matter. As long as there's a product you're able to go to market to, launch fast, scale fast, and then you're able to iterate and pivot based on your feedback, then I think you have a way for your company or for your startup to grow.
Definitely. I don't think I've ever seen any founder, male or female, right? Like raise money without really having that passion for solving a problem. So how about you, Nisha?
Yeah, I would say I have two areas I want to focus on. So one is empathy, and I think that's something that women are very, very strong on. You might be thinking, wait, how does empathy have anything to do with fundraising, right? Empathy means you don't just think about what you want to say. You think about what are they thinking, what are they looking for, what are they, what would actually be important to them, right? And you communicate that. So just to give you an example of how this works in real life when actually we were fundraising. So at the time we were fundraising in an OTT space. So think Netflix clone. This was in 2013, 2014. All VCs at the time, they look at Netflix clone in Southeast Asia and they think there's no way any startup would be able to do a Netflix clone here. The reason is because even if we give you the money, there's no way on earth you'll ever get the content, right? Because you have to who are you guys? You're just like some startup people. You're gonna go and talk to Hollywood. You're gonna go to talk to like, English Premier League. You're gonna go to like, talk to movie studios and they're gonna give you content. Like, there's no way you're ever gonna be able to do that, right? So what we did, or in this particular case, what I did was you think in terms of why would they want to give you content? So in my case, it was basically mapping out that like, okay, Hollywood has been failing in Southeast Asia in terms of penetration, in terms of online through Apple, basically Apple TV, right? So you pitch about that, then you start drilling down in terms of like numbers, what kind of opportunities are they missing, right? But it starts from having empathy to understand, not talking about what you want to say, but why it's important for them, what's in it for them, right? The second piece I want to say, and it's something that like we at AWS is also doing, is basically network. As Patricia has mentioned, right, a lot of times like investing is a boys club. It makes, it's a closed door, it's a private thing. So people invest with people they know within the network. And a lot of times, if they only know men, then that's the limitation, right? So what you can do is, try to network with other women, right? Reach out to other women to help make the intro for you to the VCs, especially those that have already raised. At AWS, some of the things that we're doing is we're trying to create network for female to actually get together, to mentor females, but at the same time provide an opportunity for you to have a network for partnership, for mentorship as well, right? And this is something that we have done earlier this year and hoping to do more as well.
So yeah, I think mentorship and building a network is super important. I think a lot of you that are here, you've already taken a first step in doing that. So congratulations to you for kind of building that. Woo! Yay! And there are plenty, I know both AWS and Zendit have programs to build communities and networks, right? Like, not just for women, for everyone, right? And that's definitely something that I would definitely encourage female founders, especially, that are looking to fundraise, to kind of start building your, you know, they don't call it Rolodex these days, whatever, right? Like, your network, right? Even before you're actually gonna start raising, right? I actually decide, I've changed my mind. I'm not going down the line. I want to end with the investors on this part. So I'll turn to the founders again first, right? So I think, you know, if you could maybe biggest challenge and how you overcame it, and also, you know, tying that into the advice, right, for fundraising. Since you've managed to do it, like, I know it's daunting for people that have never raised before, which is the majority of our audience, I'm guessing. So yeah, your advice and yeah, how you overcame it, how you got through the challenge.
So I think for founders or anybody looking to become a founder, so I have two things. The first one is about a target. So in Zen Archery, the philosophy is that you identify the target, you forget it, and then you just focus on the process. I think that is very relatable when it comes to business. And another thing that I wanted to talk about is the concept of target fixation. Target fixation means that you hit what you're looking at, right? And so while we have an understanding and while we're being mindful of the disparity, of the gap, of the issues that surround us, what's important is that we be mindful of that and then we focus on the process. Because if we are always on the lookout for things that we feel disadvantaged over, we will surely find them. If we are always looking for things, if we flip that we are entitled to, we will surely find them everywhere. But if we focus on the things that we feel grateful for, then I think that will make all the difference, most especially as a founder, period. And then the second is around shared values. So we have investors here. I think that when you're fundraising, it's so easy to just say yes to the term sheets that are there because they're so hard to come by, most especially in the global downturn that we have right now. But what we've found is that really, you really need to ensure that your values and your investors' values have a very big overlap. That is what will really lead your company to where you want to take it in the first place.
Target fixation. Is that
target fixation?
That's such an interesting concept, no? Like, and I mean, and yeah, guys, like, I think having that goal, but then focusing on how you do it, right, as opposed to, you know, just the goal in itself. I mean, it applies in many things in life, I think. So, very sage words. How about you, Crystal? Any thoughts? You're going through it now, right? You're fundraising, so baka mas relatable ka to the audience.
We're still ongoing, but I guess like backtracking even how Kevin and I became co-founders, right? Because the seed fund is from a very reputable, publicly listed company, Megaworld. So I would even say, like, I would even argue that's even harder, to be honest, like getting that kind of a company to invest in you. I feel like going through the fundraising now, it's a little bit easier than I expected. So I guess my first tip is get the right co-founders and founders. Why I'm saying that is because, at least in our case, right, like we wouldn't even have gotten the seed fund from Megaworld, even if Kevin was the founder and co-founder, because at the end of the day, he has to justify that. I had to present to the Emperador CEO, the CEO of Megaworld, the finance of Megaworld, the AGI, you know, other like high ups there, like really had to present to them, so that I felt like that was even a bit more tedious than other VC processes. And it's very important to find the right founder and co-founder to work with, because I realize now that we're fundraising together, that's what VCs invest on, the people. both you, all the founders and co-founders, and also the people under you, at least the direct management, the key people. So you have to make sure that you have the right people in place and you've partnered with the right founder, co-founder, because that, I think really that's the essence of the investment. Are they willing to give that much funds, whatever amount that is, to you specifically? Because they can give that to other people, right? The choice is between you and someone else. So at the end of the day, it's who they feel is more fit to give that fund to. So for me, that's like I guess like a couple of important advice. And then the last advice I would give going through this fundraising and having presented to a conglomerate as a seed fund is that you really have to know your numbers. Because passion and love can only get you so far. At the end of the day, especially in a country like the Philippines, I'll be very honest, there's a lot of very good salesmen. We were very good at presenting, speaking, pitching, also because I guess English is our first language, right? So you'll meet a lot of very good people who speak well. And I think I'm giving this as a tip, especially, I guess this is more to also empower women. I think my observation in the Philippines, not just in this whole startup, being a founder, but even in jobs. And before doing Picaroo, I've managed startups. I've been a CEO of Canva. I launched Viber in the Philippines. I launched Honestly in the Philippines. And normally it's men. It's always men that I see usually catch these roles in this country. So my advice is, especially for the females, is you have to believe in yourself and you have to want it as much as they do. And it's the same that it's the same that I noticed with fundraising, and maybe that's why there's a lot more men or male founders or startups than females, is because there's also not a lot of females that believe in themselves or that want it as much as the men would do. And that's something that I noticed. If ever like men do a little bit better, they just have a lot more ego, I guess, and belief. They have so much of it, sometimes too much of it, and they do get the investment or the job just because they want it more and they feel like they deserve it more. So I guess, like, at this day and age, it's about time that females also want it even more than they do. Yeah.
Want it just as much, show that you want it just as much. And I think both of you shared this sentiment that basically, finding that right fit, don't get blinded by the term sheet or the first offer that you see, right? And I can definitely say this, I would definitely think that breaking up with a co-founder or an investor is probably harder than getting a divorce or annulment or whatever, right? So it's really like a long relationship and, very important. So I've been getting the signal that we should wrap this up. So of course, I want to end by asking our investors, right? Like, what's your advice? What would it take for you to write a check to more women, right? So, what's your advice for ladies that are fundraising? And yeah, how do we, please help me end this on a strong note of tips coming from the investor's point of view. So. Before all our mics completely die. So.
Hello? Okay. So I think what you mentioned about knowing your numbers, right? I think that's super important. I think it's a combination of knowing your numbers and having a compelling narrative. I mean, that, of course, on top of having a business model that is strong and that is solving a problem. So I think that's kind of one on the fundamental kind of health of your business, right? And I think, secondly, getting the right team on board, absolutely true. I mean, at the early stages, we don't have a lot to go on by, right? What we look at is the size of the opportunity, how strong is the team. The belief is that if you have a strong team, you're gonna pivot your business multiple times, right? When you're raising pre-seed, like in a year's time, your business might look different. But the comfort that we get as investors is that if you're investing in the right team, we believe that the team can handle that, right? And I think lastly, be very conscious when you're building your cap table, right? Because I think when you first start your, pre-seed, seed raise, having the right people on board on your cap table is also something very important. Like I think as VCs, we like to see a balanced cap table, making sure that the co-founders, the team, have the right stake, making sure that you don't have such a big concentration of, single investor. And I think the reason for that is as you grow, right, like the other investors that comes in, and VC comes in as a syndicate typically, you need to make sure that the team is incentivized enough to continue, the growth going forward. So I think that would be my key tips.
I hope you're listening. And last but not the least, Paolo, for your key tips.
Yeah, sounds good. So I mean, I guess I'll echo what a lot of my co-panelists have shared in terms of advice. But yeah, I guess maybe from my side, three things. The first, as Patricia mentioned, and actually as the rest of them as well, it's the team, right? I mean, especially early stage investors, we're betting on a number of things, but we're mostly betting on the team. So think hard and right about who you're going to go for. If you're going to be a solo founder, if you're going to be a co-founder, what type of domain knowledge do you have? What type of expertise do you have in the space? If you're two, how you guys complement each other. So again, it is, at the early stage, both Seed Starts and Venture Lab invest pretty early. So there's a lot of betting on the team. So I think that's first and foremost. And also, as female founders, don't shy away from the limelight. I think they both mentioned it right. Because, we'll want to talk to you anyway, right? If it's only the male founder that's presenting, we'll always ask for the co-founder, right? So come up front, be yourself and be prepared and be ready and believe in yourself, right? The second is, as much as, when you're solving a problem, as much as you can, know your customer. Everybody's trying to solve, the billion or presenting a large market, but we want to understand how you can provide value to your customers, and that comes from knowing them well. So if you know them well, much more than what the PowerPoint suggests from your deck, then I think that will show. That's pretty instrumental, right? So know your customer, engage with them, and that will show when you're pitching. Then lastly, think big. Always think big, but especially in this climate, focus on sustainable growth, right? So I don't think we're at the growth at all costs anymore. You might have to put a little bit more in the unit economics on the slide moving forward, which I think is healthy, right? I think difficult times will showcase the strong companies, right? So think big, always look to grow your business and to dominate nationally or even regionally, but also do it in a sustainable way that has very good unit economics.
Thank you. I hope you will also join me in thanking and applauding our panelists today and thanking them for sharing their experiences and advice on fundraising. Good advice is good advice. Good entrepreneurs are good entrepreneurs, male or female. But, it's always great to be, for the ladies, always great to be, the lady, So, I think the three T's, right? The team, the TAM, the timing, So, again, thank you to our panelists today for sharing with us. We will, of course, take some photos, but that's really it. We're wrapping up the Startup Pinay Conference. Action Venture Labs is hosting, a few more snacks and drinks for everyone. So I hope we get to stay around and network. That's been the advice throughout this whole session. Thank you again for joining me. And yeah, have a good rest of Startup Week, everyone. So thank you very much.
Thank you once again to our panelists, and of course, for everyone for our panelists. We hope you enjoyed and had a lot of learning from the panel discussion. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Of course, once again, we have Ms. Aleli Santos, Nisha Sabuongli, Paolo Lipcauco, Patricia Sosrodoho, Alexandria Jenny, Crystal Gonzalez, and of course, Ms. Katrina Chan, joining this panel discussion.
Yeah.
Jose Mongo, and PWC. Again, thank you for joining us until the official end of the Startup